ball to go blading at the skate park down by the mall. But my mom says I gotta prevent hostile aliens from...
Hey everybody, Sol here. I have only one rule here. If it's animated, I'll comment on it. And I used to be a teenager once. Yes, back in the good old days of 2013, I too used to climb trees and play hopscotch and shotgun can after can of Canadian beer and snort line after line of cocaine, just like the teenagers of nowadays. But that's all behind me now. Now I'm a crotchety old bitch at the age of 22, and my only pleasure is tearing apart other people's creative creations. Well, that and bingo. Oh, and hot, sexy tail. But anyway, what's on the chopping block for today's review? Oh, my life as a teenage robot, eh? This is gonna be fun. My Life as a Teenage Robot is a 2D animated series created by Rob Renzetti, which began life as a pilot known as My Neighbor Was a Teenage Robot, created during his stint on Oh Yeah cartoons. The series was produced by Frederator Studios and Nickelodeon Animation Studios, and it aired on Nickelodeon in 2003 with a total of 40 episodes over 3 seasons. Though the show was officially cancelled due to low ratings in 2005, unaired episodes of the 3rd season were aired up until 2009 on Nicktoons. Alright, I'm ready to take on these whippersnappers and show them what for... Okay, I'm serious this time. Stop me if you've heard this plot before. XJ9, aka Jenny Wakeman, is a superpowered teenage girl who goes to high school. Well, there's one thing that makes this plot different from the literally thousands of other things about teenagers going to high school, and that's that XJ9 is a robot. Yeah. Not gonna lie, but this plot isn't exactly a tsunami of creative juice squirting out of the imagination glands. Everywhere I turn, this plot is pulling up flags from other things I've seen. She's a superhero attending school? Oh, Danny Phantom, Atomic Betty, Sky High, Spider-Man, Hero High, probably 1,000 different anime too. I won't waste my time listing all of them, and yes, truthfully, the different situations that Jenny and her friends Brad, Tuck, and Sheldon get into differentiate this series from its similar brethren, but not enough for me, unfortunately. It doesn't do anything to stand out in that regard. As I always say, a simple plot can be the most interesting. But I don't think that adage particularly applies to this series. I'll be going into detail a little bit later, but for now, let's take a look at the characters. Seems like, judging from my past reviews, I haven't had much luck with robots. From the giant mechs of Symbiotic Titan to the equally as giant mechs of Megas XLR. It seems like whenever I talk about robots, you guys can't jam that dislike button fast enough. Yeah. Oh, but I liked Iron Giant, remember that? So kicking this cavalcade off is XJ9, who prefers to be called Jenny Wakeman. She's a gynoid automaton who frequently saves the world from harm with a plethora of weapons and crazy gadgets she can store inside her body, but all she wants is to be a regular teenage girl and attend Tremerton High School without incident. To be as frank as a furter, I don't much care for Jenny. Why is that? Well, as hard as it may be to believe, I was once a teenage girl just like her. And you know something? Based on my experience, teenage girls are the most spoiled, selfish, irritating, self-aggrandizing, insecure, two-faced, needy little bastards on the planet. Of course, that's not a universal law, and I'm sure that generalization will get me more than a few hateful diatribes in the comments section, but some of those unfortunate traits are definitely installed in Jenny's C drive. Not to say Jenny's a bad person, and in all fairness, I can see why people would like her as a character. I just can't sympathize with her whining about the low-stakes threats of teenagehood when I believe there are a million better things she could be doing with her time. I think it's mostly because she lacks the human touch of other outcast superhero or supernatural characters like Danny Fenton, Rex Salazar, Norman Babcock, or Takashi Natsume. Jenny just doesn't reach the same levels of sympathy or association from me because she's a robot. She wasn't built to fit in, she was built to fight crime. It may sound like I'm being overly harsh on her, but I can't lie and say she scratches an itch when she just doesn't.
Are you saying you'd rather I lie and tell you she's perfect just to make you feel better? Well, no deal.
Okay, moving along here, we've got Brad Carbuncle, Jenny's first friend who attends the same high school as her, and who comports himself as a smooth ladies' man, but is, in actuality, seen as a loser by his peers. Brad is, he's pretty much the same as Marco from Star vs. the Forces of Evil. He's the supportive male best friend who's smart, adventurous, but has his limits, has trouble with women, and who may or may not have a romantic interest in the superpowered female protagonist. They also both have cracky puberty voices, but that's beside the point. Just the fact alone isn't enough to make me not care for Brad, though unlike Marco, I just find there's something a bit lacking with Brad. It's hard to say what, but maybe it's just that he's a little too supportive of Jenny. Their personalities don't clash much, which doesn't make any particularly interesting conflicts. Well, anyway, stepping away from that minefield, let's take a look at Tuck Carbuncle, Brad's little brother, who's a bit of a live wire, though his many childish fears keep him from being as audacious as he'd like. Tuck is a bit bothersome, since he buzzes around every scene he's in like a worker bee on meth, and can be rather manipulative and fiendish at times, but he's not quite annoying enough for me to get all up in a tizzy. Then there's Dr. Nora Wakeman, Jenny's creator, who's an expert in all manners of science. Dr. Wakeman just sorta encompasses the typical, uncool, embarrassing parent trope in shows such as these, but does have an amusing line or moment every now and then, so she gets a pass in my eyes. Lastly, on the side of the good guys is Sheldon Lee, an ASFarian nerd of nerds who has a passion for robotics and would love to connect his male adapter to Jenny's auxiliary in input, if you know what I mean. Out of all the characters in this show, I think Sheldon is by far the most interesting. I just can't help but feel bad for him, since his romantic advances on Jenny are constantly rebuffed, even though he's very clear that he's not a bad guy. He's passionate and sweet, always willing to help out Jenny whenever she needs it, but everyone just treats him with contempt and ridicule. I don't know why, but there's something about Sheldon that really speaks to me.
An intelligent, overzealous nerd who's a social outcast but tries not to let it ruin his life, who has a not-so-normal sexual proclivity and has fucked up teeth. Gee, can't imagine who that reminds me of.
Finally, let's take a quick look at the villains, mainly Queen Vexus of the Cluster, a race of robots from another planet who look to enslave all humans and make Jenny join their robotic collective. Queen Vexus is cunning and clever, but she lacks a real presence as a villain. In fact, you could say that about all the villains in this series, from Commander Smitus of the Cluster, to the Space Bikers, to this pathetic Zim ripoff known as Kilgore. Though I will say this, the stereotypical popular girls in high school, the crust cousins Britt and Tiff, may be complete bitches and have not even a shred of likability in their spiteful bodies, but at least they're not cheerleaders. I know that's a weird observation, but it's nice to see the bitch characters not be affiliated with cheerleaders.
I'm doomed, aren't I? I've pissed off the overly nostalgic, the technosexuals, the Nickelodeon lovers, and just about everyone else under the sun with my observations. I'm not gonna tempt fate, I'm just gonna move along to the good things so that I don't give any of these ticking time bombs watching my review a chance to explode. Why do I do this to myself? I'm gonna drown under a sea of "you killed my childhood" comments, and I'll have nobody to blame but myself for having an honest opinion. Well, I might as well use my last seconds of life before I'm killed again to talk about the good things.
Firstly, I want to talk about the overall style this cartoon has, which is by far the most striking thing about it. In this animation pie, we've got a cup of the Powerpuff Girls, a tablespoon of Astro Boy, a dash of Clone High, a smidgen of early Disney, and a heapin' helpin' of Samurai Jack. Mix that all together, and you get this series. I quite like the flat, 1950s Cold War era propaganda-esque aesthetic that it exudes, and the use of varying colors during the action sequences. It all makes for a subdued, yet vibrant experience that's a real treat for the eyes. And tagging along with that appealing aesthetic is the fact that this series does have an underlying feeling of creepiness running through it, like a slight chill up your spine that every so often becomes more noticeable, which is something I rather enjoy. It lends a bit of an artificial air to the whole presentation worthy of its namesake that makes the world and its inhabitants more engaging to watch. Also, when this series feels like it, it can be fairly amusing at times. I'd say the majority of the jokes fall flat, but every so often it hits home with a real rafflecopter of laughs.
Do people even say rafflecopter anymore? God damn, I'm old.
And as I mentioned earlier, I do quite like Sheldon. I wouldn't go as far as to say the focus of the show should have been on him, because that's a slippery slope that could lead to nasty stereotyping of nerds in general. But it would have been nice to see Sheldon get a bit of vindication in his pursuit of Jenny.
I mean, come on, how often do you see open and proud technosexuals in animation? Throw him a bone, for God's sakes. Or at least a graphics card. Ooh, baby, your fan sync will keep you cool all night. I'm not gonna hurt you like the others. Yes, indeed. I was just having a engaging conversation with this. Yeah, it's, yes, the graphics card. Anyway, yeah, let's, look at the bad things, shall we?
Now I know I'm basically putting my head under a guillotine here for saying this, but I have to be completely 100% truthful here. What this series lacks is a spark. You know what I mean? It seems to lack that one special thing that hooks you in like a fish and keeps your attention clear and focused. I'd call it mediocre, but that's a bit harsh. It's just that nothing has the impact I feel it rightfully should have, emotionally and physically. Everything is just so by the book in terms of the concept, the character lineup, the villains, and just the overall progression of the story that it's hard to be enthusiastic when nothing has any far-reaching consequences or the like. There's just something cold and sterile about the presentation that leaves me high and dry in terms of compliments. And believe me, nobody is more surprised by that than me. I've been hyped on this series for so long, and when I finally got around to watching it, it didn't exactly grip me with its song and dance.
Trust me, I want to like this show, but it's against my alignment to lie about such things. I think I'm chaotic neutral?
I guess to sum up my point, I feel as though I've seen this series 1,000 times before, but only bits of pieces of it, which were ripped off of other sources and crudely stapled together here. It's clear that a lot of care and passion went into this series, and I'm not knocking that by any means. But if you don't give me good bait, I'm not gonna be the fish you catch today. I think one of the reasons it doesn't grip me like it should is because Jenny can always pull the solution to any problem out of her tinny tush whenever she likes, so there's no real threat towards her or anyone. I'd say it's a brick wall series, but that's not quite right, since the threats never really get bigger or meaner. The threat level stays the same, like a flatlining heartbeat throughout the entire runtime. I suppose that's a good way to describe this series as a whole. It's definitely got heart, but it doesn't have a pulse.
There. I think all my bridges are sufficiently burned now. I say good riddance to them. They were all too rickety, and I think one of them was stealing my video games for drug money. Hey! Okay, so to prevent this from dragging on too long, and because I have to search my entire house for bridges to burn, I'll just quickly state that my least favorite episode is Victim of Fashion.
In this episode, Britt and Tiff challenge Jenny to a fashion showdown, where it's survival of the hippest, and only one will win. Now, there are a few good reasons why I dislike this episode the most, but the big deciding factor isn't the vapidity of the concept or the slow pace upon which it takes, but the fact that this episode, with such a bare-bones plot, is one of the only 2 double-length episodes, not counting the TV movie. The fact that they'd waste an entire extra episode's length of time on something like this is more than enough reason for me to chuck it in the trash pile.
And now I am entirely bridge-free. Oh, and my favorite episode is Speak No Evil.
In this episode, Jenny travels to Japan to fight a monster, but accidentally loses her English language disc during the scuffle. Now she's stuck speaking only Japanese to everyone, and nobody can understand her, even as a threat encroaches upon their home. Now this might sound like an odd reason to make something my favorite episode, but I like this episode in particular because even though Jenny is speaking Japanese the entire time, there's no subtitles. Meaning that if you want to know what she's saying, you need to know Japanese, like me. And yes, I know full well that's a bit of a trivial reason to favor this episode over the others, but in a series like this, that's about as good as it gets for me.
My Life as a Teenage Robot was disappointing in most aspects of it, except for the eye-catching visuals it seems, but I have to admit that it's most likely not a show for me. When you're a teenager, it's such a tough time, so having a character or a scenario that you can relate to really helps to make it a little bit easier. So in creating a character that all you teens out there can relate to, I say it succeeds in it and then some, but for all you desiccated 20-somethings out there like me, there's not much I can recommend in this bucket of bolts. I give My Life as a Teenage Robot
2.5 eyes out of 5.
So, My Life as a Teenage Robot. Is it watchable? You bet your sweet baby, son. It really does have an arresting aesthetic to it that makes it alluring to your irises. Is it enjoyable? Well, I think that depends on what age you are. If you're my age, I'd say maybe. But if you're teen, also maybe. It's hard to say. It's not for me to say, really. Is it memorable? Well, considering that this series was cancelled for low ratings, it does seem that people have a nostalgic fondness to it. And because of that, I am barricading myself in my house for the rest of the year. Cheerio!
Want to stay up to date with all the latest EyeofSol news? You can follow me on Twitter as well as on Facebook at twitter.com/EyeofSol299 and facebook.com/EyeofSol. I update them every day, so if you want to check out news on the show as well as updates, just follow the links here. Hey everybody, thanks for watching my review of My Life as a Teenage Robot and the final series review this year. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate a like and a share of this video, as well as a subscription to my channel, because I always appreciate that. If you want to check out the previous Sol episodes, you can see the annotations playing on the video right now. Or if you want to check out my various social media sites, you can see my links to my Twitter page and my Facebook page there on the screen for you, as well as in the description. If you have an idea for an animated series or movie you want me to comment on, you can leave me a message in the YouTube comments on any one of my social media sites, or just let me know in any way you can think of to let me know what you want to see, and I'll add it to my list. Okay? Thanks again for watching everybody, and I will see you next week for the first episode in Sol's Holiday Fuckfest.